Greetings again and welcome to this session of your musculoskeletal system course. We're going to be going over the anatomy of the femoral triangle in this session, so let's go ahead and get started with that. The femoral triangle is generally a triangular depressed area that is located in the upper medial aspect of the anterior thigh. So just generally in anatomy, whenever we have like certain muscles or structures that form a specific region that has important organs or important structures there, we tend to focus on it. So the femoral triangle is one of those regions. So like I said, it's triangular in shape and it's located in the upper medial aspect of the anterior part of the thigh. It generally lies below the inguinal ligament and is oriented in a way that the base is superior. So the base of the triangle is directed upwards, and the apex of the triangle is directed inferiorly. Okay, so this picture here, we're looking at the anterior aspect of the thigh. Okay, you can see here, you've got the superior boundary of the upper part, which is formed by the inguinal ligament up here. Okay, and then you've got this muscle here, which you should remember from your previous video, is the sartorius. And what it does is that it forms the lateral boundary. Okay? And then another muscle that hasn't been mentioned yet because you haven't taken the medial compartment is this muscle here, which is actually part of the medial compartment of the thigh. And this muscle is called the adductor longus. Now, the adductor longus forms the medial boundary of the femoral triangle. So you've got the inguinal ligaments up here, you've got the inguinal ligament up here, you've got the sartorius laterally, and you've got the adductor longus medially. So you can see that they form a triangular shape in this region here, okay? And like I said, the base of the triangle is directed superiorly, and the apex of the triangle is down here inferiorly where the adductor longus and the sartorius meet. So this region in the middle here, this is the femoral triangle. Now, the femoral triangle also has a floor, and when we say floor, we basically mean what the contents of the femoral triangle rest on. Okay, so basically in order to see the floor, I'd have to remove the contents, and then underneath them I would find the floor of the femoral triangle. Now the floor is formed by two muscles, which are the iliopsoas, mentioned previously, as well as the pectineus. The roof, which is basically anything that covers the femoral triangle, consists of skin and fascia. So essentially, in order to find the femoral triangle, there are certain structures that you'd have to remove, i.e. the covering structures or the roof, and these would be the skin and fascia. Okay? Now, the contents of the femoral triangle, since it is found in the upper medial aspect of the thigh, then basically it's going to consist of any structures that are passing from the abdomen into the thigh or from the thigh back into the abdomen. So, the contents of the femoral triangle are three, and usually just to make them easy for you to remember, we list them out from the medial side to the lateral side of the thigh. And these are the femoral vein, the femoral artery, and the femoral nerve. Okay, so these are the main structures that you find in the femoral triangle. Okay, and like I said, remember, take them from medial to lateral just so that you can remember them easily. Okay, so this is the femoral triangle here. Remember, we're going to take them from medial to lateral. Okay, so you've got the most medial structure to be the femoral vein. In the middle, you've got the femoral artery, and most laterally, you've got the femoral nerve. Okay, so those are the three main things that you're going to find in the femoral triangle. Now, one of the important things to remember is that the The abdomen, pelvis, and lower limb are three regions that are very closely connected to each other. So we've already seen, for example, how the femoral artery is a continuation of the external iliac, which originally started in the pelvis. We already saw how you have the psoas major, which is actually in the abdomen, extending down to insert into the lower limb. So basically, you're going to find an overlap or communication in the structures between these three regions. So one of the structures that comes in close relation with all three of them is the fascia of the abdominal wall. So it's basically one of the layers that forms the anterior abdominal wall. And what it does is that it extends from the abdomen and it moves all the way down until it reaches the thigh, and it forms something called the femoral sheath. Now, the femoral sheath is it's just basically a layer of connective tissue that originally started in the abdominal wall and then it extended down into the lower limb. And what it does is that it surrounds certain structures that are found in the femoral triangle. Those being the femoral vein, the femoral artery, and lymphatic vessels. However, the femoral nerve is found outside the femoral sheath. Okay? So let's just see that in picture form and see if we can just explain it a little easier. Okay, so up here, this is the region of the lower abdomen, okay, extending into the pelvis. Okay, and then the fascia, which is one of the layers of the anterior abdominal wall, is going to extend downwards. Okay, and then notice here how the femoral artery, the femoral vein are kind of surrounded by this white layer, okay? And notice how for the vein and the artery, this white connective tissue layer is found on both sides, so inside and outside, okay? So that means that these two structures are held together by this sheath, but the femoral nerve is not, so it doesn't have any facial covering around it. So the facial covering only surrounds the femoral artery and the vein, but it does not surround the femoral nerve. And you can see here in this region, they've actually cut off the anterior layer. But you can see here how it's covering the two structures together. Okay, and if you remember in the anterior compartment of the thigh, I mentioned how there is an opening in the deep fascia of the thigh called the saphenous opening, where we have the great saphenous vein passing in order to join and drain into the femoral vein. Okay, so this is the saphenous opening here, and you've got the great saphenous vein draining into the femoral vein. All right, and as mentioned, this is the femoral sheath surrounding only the artery and the vein, but not the nerve. Now, internally, so inside the femoral sheath, you have fibrous septa that divide the femoral sheath into compartments in a way that each structure is kind of found in its own separate space. Now, there's a region or a part of the femoral sheath that is found most medially, okay, and this is called the femoral canal. So this is one of the compartments that you have inside the femoral sheath. Usually this compartment contains lymphatics, and it has an opening that is referred to as the femoral ring. Okay, so let's just go back to that picture again. Okay, so notice here, where's my, okay, this is the femoral sheath covering the femoral artery and the vein, and in here, these white lines, these are the fibrous septa that separate the femoral sheath into internal compartments. So notice how you've got the artery by itself, you've got the vein in its own compartment. And then up here, okay, medial to the femoral vein, you actually have another compartment that is separated by this fibrous septa here and this fibrous septa here, septum, okay? So this space, which is found medial to the femoral vein, this is called the femoral canal. Now, usually this space just has lymphatics, okay? And it actually has an opening in its superior aspect here. This is called the femoral ring, okay? Now, notice how this is actually an area of communication between the lower limb and the abdomen. So sometimes, since this is an opening, if the abdominal pressure gets too high, you can have certain structures passing through this opening. Because it's such a small space, they're going to end up bulging, and forming something called a hernia, which is just basically a protrusion from the surface of the body because an organ or a structure is trapped in a space that's too small for it. Okay, so like we said, there are fibrous septa that divide the femoral sheath into compartments. And then most medially you had a space called the femoral canal that contained lymphatics, and its opening was called the femoral ring. Okay, and the middle compartment, like you saw in the picture, was where the femoral vein was found, and the most lateral compartment was the one that had the femoral artery. And remember that the femoral nerve is found outside the femoral sheath completely. Okay, so those are the major points that you need to remember about the femoral vein, sorry, the femoral triangle. Remember to make sure that you know where the femoral triangle is found, make sure that you know what the boundaries are, and make sure that you can list the contents of the femoral triangle from medial to lateral. And again, I'll be leaving you with another positive message. Whatever it is that's going on in your lives right now, I think it's always better to be optimistic because that just makes dealing with life's challenges a lot more easier. And, sometimes things always work out better than you expect them to. So that's all I have for you today. I hope the session was useful for you, and I will see you guys next time.